First of all, thanks very much for joining the daily practice programming. This program began as something I wanted to join with Just Movement Practice Burn, based on some fundamental movements that we were looking at and have been looking at. And the reason their fundamentals will become clearer as we move on, and why I consider them fundamentals. But essentially, it became quite obvious that it would be useful to more than just the few people in my group. So this is why I expanded it out. So thank you very much for your response and for joining in. The daily practice programming, there's a reason why it's not called movement practice programming, because from my perspective of what I believe a movement practice can be for different people, it is incomplete. I mean, of course, you cannot write your entire practice on one piece of paper. So this is why it's very much, it's a daily practice, gives you something to practice daily. And it consists of things like a morning practice and, of course, a physical practice. To call this, the training part, to call it a movement practice for me, it would be off the mark of what I consider a movement practice to be. If you're interested in that, you can ask me a bit later, just jot a note down, but it might not be interesting to some people. Just one thing that I'll speak about consistently when we're just going through some of the stuff is the perspective of how I try to encourage people to practice, as well as the actual physical elements, certain cues, certain variations, certain restrictions or possibilities that some people might meet. Starting with the physical practice, two things that I speak about a lot are the model. This is the movement that we're looking at, and this relates to the video resource, the model that is set, so the intention. So what is this? I wrote about it a little bit. The model is basically what you see. You want to learn how to do, I don't know, a backflip or something. You watch a video on YouTube, and it's this perfect backflip, and you try it like I did a few years ago, and you fall on your shoulder, and you break up your acromial process. My model is very, very bad, because I didn't have the information, I didn't have a progression to meet that model. Our movements are much more simple. However, there are definitely still some times where the model, so what you actually do compared to how it looks, may not be optimal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, which is what's great about the fundamental movements that I presented. They're not really movements that, if you're doing suboptimally, will injure you. So this is quite a nice thing. It's not like, okay, I'm back squatting for 1.5 times body weight. If your form isn't locked in, you can injure yourself quite badly. But these types of movements, there will just be a learning experience. So whilst I encourage people to get it wrong, you have to get it wrong, it will always be improved. That's the model. And the second idea, intention, is what you mean to do. What is your intention? What do you actually mean to do? Are you just kind of, I'm moving my hands in a certain way, but I have no idea what it's for or what I'm doing? This is very common. This is the learning process. You have to develop the understanding of what you need to do. But in order to develop that understanding, very often you have to practice without much understanding first of all. You may have had this yourself. You may have been practicing a movement and I'm really not sure exactly what this does, but it takes time to develop this understanding, and I'll give you a bit of this intention today. Let's go straight in with, where are we? I'm going to start here from teacups, medial and lateral teacups. So just to clarify, medial is essentially when we're coming towards the body. So when you've got your medial epicondyle or a medial pattern, you're coming in towards the body. And lateral is when you're going to be moving away. So if you think of your classic, lateral raises from the bodybuilding days, this is where it comes from. So that's all it is. It's just a terminology that if you keep this terminology constant, it's like, oh yeah, this movement, it actually goes laterally, but you can use it medially as well. This comes up in many places. A very simple way to work with this is starting for the medial version. I think of the pinkies, these small fingers here. The 2 cups of water must always be facing upwards. And this is where it's important, yeah? Your model. Are you actually holding the palms up? Or at some point, are you kind of giving some kind of flashy little dance up here and it somehow comes down? In some cases, people will just come, here. But we really want the medial teacups and the lateral as it comes underneath. I have to make space for myself. So I open. I come overhead, they cross overhead, and as I continue, they cross the other direction. The crossing in opposite directions is not a huge important thing, but if the coordination challenge, if you want a bit more, yeah, work with that. And the same with the medial. I'm just going through quite mechanically right now. I'll get more specific in a moment. Of course, the lateral, I think of heading outwards with the thumbs. So medial, in with the pinky finger, lateral, out with the thumbs. I'm opening up, I'm crossing over, give space. If you get stuck here, just open the arms, man. Give yourself more space, come underneath. And this movement is specifically done with a breathing pattern. So I'll just demonstrate it right now. And you can also see the way my spine works with the movement. I start with my hands full of water. I'm going to start medial, so the pinky fingers. As I come down, full spinal flexion, also in the lumbar spine here. Breathe in, extension, flexion. Open, close. Open, close. And move with your breathing. Extending with the spine, closing. I immediately switch direction. And when I'm breathing in, it depends how you want to take this. In the beginning, all these movements, you can take the perspective as you like. So for example, in this routine specifically, it's actually used for shoulder and scapular preparation. We're kind of tracing the lines. You should be able to feel the scapula running down the back of the rib cage. And also you'll find any restrictions and things specific that day. Sometimes, it goes around like it's oiled and it's beautiful. And sometimes there's one thing just clicking. So it's a diagnosis tool as well. It's also useful for breathing practice. I personally use it every morning with my breathing practice. And it's also global spinal extension and spinal flexion. And before we go into stuff like isolated spinal work and waves and things like this, 2 main things: extension, flexion, and then lateral extension and flexion. So this is where we have the side bending work, and also in the sagittal plane, this work as well. And if you have clients or you work with people and you want to start introducing stuff like spinal work, maybe, do your spinal wave against the wall for 10 minutes is not the best option for someone who has no concept of moving their spine. Give them something simple like teacups. So the next thing we'll move into is straight in with the wrist mobility routine. If you can, I would like you to do this along with me if it's possible, because there's some quite specific things in a routine that essentially looks quite fundamental and simple. So the first thing we'll start off with is mobilization of the fingers. I distinguish between types of wrist preparation. We have wrist mobilization. Mobilization is going through your ranges, checking what's available that day. The hand balancer, a performer and great mover as well, Jürgen Marmerstein, has described it as tuning the instrument. It's not quite the same every day. So for me, this is the mobilization part. This is when we're working with the fingers, the wrists, and then we have the strengthening element, which is the movements more at the end of the routine that are perhaps common to you. But I'll just show them specifically how I like them done. First of all, when working with the fingers, keep the arms straight, And relax the shoulders. There can be a tendency to start shrugging up and holding tension in the shoulders. Now, when I work through the fingers, be very deliberate. It's not just keyboard tapping. You know, I do this 6 to 10 hours a day, so I don't need it in my practice. But greater extension, I do need. It should literally feel like this, the equivalent of this with your mouth. Like stretch it open, each one. And when you're working with this simple frame, a nice way to give it another context is to work with some patterns. So for example, I'm working with a lateral to medial pattern, which basically means outwards, in, outwards, in, outwards, in. I start from the outside and I flow in. And then of course we can go inside, out, inside, out, inside, out, inside, out. We can also do waterfall, left to right, left, right, left, right. We can also do, we can also do just a descending fingers. So one side here. This requires some coordination and timing, but basically just some different ways to frame this idea. The next thing we'll move to is then incorporating the wrists into the movement. And again, check your elbows, check you're not tensing up in the shoulders. So I'm working with external and internal rotation. Be aware that I'm not working it from the shoulder here. Yeah, none of this wrist work comes from the shoulder. It's here. So you're talking forearm, like this internal, external rotation with the hand. And this is quite free here. From here, we close it up to about 50% tension. And then we work with the wrist circles. And again, this is digging in. Yeah, we just take our time. You can even hear cracking up. We're working a few one way. We work a few the other way. Make sure that you're not getting it from here. It's here. Isolate. Good. Yeah, one of my martial arts teachers, we like, it's very common and popular to speak about, you know, integration, integrate your patterns, blah, blah, blah. And he would say also, now, first of all, you need to disintegrate. For example, I try to move my wrists and my elbows are moving. I'm trying to do a scapular, an active hang, and my elbows are moving as well. You know, I'm trying to isolate the rib cage, but my whole body is moving. Too integrated. We need to disintegrate, then reintegrate with some intention, something we want to do. Moving into the more specific mobilization elements, we go internal against the floor. Again, I just make sure that I'm not getting it from the shoulder. I'm not getting it from the shoulder. I'm bringing it in here. I'm bringing it down here. I extend, and then I start with the circles. With these circles, one important thing is this is an active movement. What does this mean? It means that I'm actually gripping against the ground. You can even see my fingertips go a bit white. It's not crazy gripping, but I want it to be active, and I'm slightly turning outwards. So I work this movement again. I try not to let too much peeling happen. I try to keep it stuck to the floor, just working one direction and the other. Again, it doesn't have to be for specific reps, but something around 10. Some days you might need a lot more, some days a lot less. I always in the middle give a good shake out. This is not just I'm shaking. No, this is elasticity. Elasticity. You don't need to go mental. Start, you know, easy, but we do want elasticity in these joints as well. So in the middle, I want to feel the, you know, the kind of touching, the blub, blub, blub of the fingers together. It's a sensation. You can create it all the way through the body. Yep, I start here. The second movement, when we're working with the rotations, we're coming into the top of the hands here. Now, when dealing with restriction, because we want the back of the palm to be completely flat to the ground, this means that if you have some restriction, you're going to have to come wider. You'll have to come maybe even towards here. I've got one guy with a really injured wrist. This one is like this. The other one, he has to place here. Not a problem at all. But we are working towards this position. Again, I'm actively extending into the floor, which means I'm pushing the fingers down. The fingers should always contact. And as I work with this, maybe I'm here working with my circles, or if I can, I come closer. If you do have any pain or issues on the closing angle side, just be mindful of this. This is not so great. It can happen. What I would advise, if you have a wrist injury, you can still work with these movements, but I would work them with isometrics. So basically, I would just have you just there like this and just push into the floor, hold it like 5 seconds, and then release. Give it a little shake out, maybe bring it closer, push into the floor, 5 seconds, and release. And the same with the other ones. You can work them with isometrics. Good. So I believe the next movement, we're working with the wrist extension pulses. This is also just to build some elasticity. I'm a big fan of working with pulsing because it can be very, very gradually increased in intensity depending upon you. We're not, full on going nuts. It's just how you need it for yourself at that time. So the pulsing, you can start from the knees, the fingers face directly backwards. And if you're sharing this with people, especially if you've got people that lift pretty much just weights, don't be surprised if they do not even have enough external rotation to point backwards. Yeah, Mark Bell, I don't know if you know, strongman Mark Bell, he was doing a video with Kelly Starrett. And Kelly Starrett was like, yeah, just point your hands backwards. Mark Bell was like this. And he said, no, externally rotate them so they're backwards. And he said, no, I can't externally rotate any more than that. But the guy's a strong man. It's his speciality, okay? So from here, pointing directly backwards, I'm pulsing. And I try not too much to go with the raising palm. It will peel a bit. But the problem is, if I'm raising the palm all the time, it just really gives me a false idea of where my wrist mobility is. There's no point. Okay, so from here, we just work backwards. If you do need a bit more intensity, you can work to the feet here. If it's not necessary, no point to jump into it, but if you need a bit more, that option is available for you, okay? Last thing, when you start getting deeper into the wrist work and the pulsing work, whilst I come back, in order to come forward, I'm pushing the fingers into the ground. This also works, for example, like when you're correcting in the handstand. I push the fingers to come back. Lift. It's the same idea, but backwards. So I'm push, 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 push. This is the concept that I'm working with at the moment. This one is perhaps not in there, but you can use this one as well. Same idea, work with the pulses, extend in the floor. You can come from here, or you can be on your knees. Again, the previous one, we were working in a position of wrist extension. This is just a position of wrist flexion, okay? Again, active, keep it active. Shaky, shaky, shaky. Then we'll go into the first movement, which is strength movement, which is the wrist fist extensions. Very specific way I want this to be done, okay? Fingers together for a start. This is the distance that you want, fingers together. As I come down, the elbows line with the hands, line with the chest. This is where I come to, here. Not here, not down here. I just got a straight line coming down here. This allows for kind of maximal flexion of the elbow, and it's also just keeping it in a straight tracking pattern rather than tracking backwards or tracking forward. So with this movement, one thing you should make sure is that it's controlled. There's no point in kind of like boom, 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 boom. Like if you want to build lasting strength in a position, especially when dealing with prehabilitation, time under tension is your friend. Time under tension is your friend. Whether this is built with isometrics or eccentrics, time under tension is your friend. For me, time under tension is the equivalent of experience for your body. Just like if you visit an exotic, nice place, if you go to Rio, I want to go to Rio again. If you go to Rio and you spend 1 week, but if you go to Rio and you spend 3 months and you visit all these amazing places and you meet people, this is experience. This is time under experience. Translation for movement for me, time under tension. When I'm working with this pattern, it comes down to the chest. Bring the elbows to the floor where possible. If you cannot get the elbows all the way to the floor, so here, or the forearms flat, and this is just going to be a case that you've got some limited flexion in your elbows. It's very common as well in some cases to start feeling some experiences of inflammation and things in there as well. So just be mindful of this, that exists if that's an issue. From here, as soon as I get to this point, I cannot go anymore. I close the fist. When I come down, I open. It's an unstacking. I control the eccentric. Doesn't have to be this slow. I'll show it in real time in a moment. But it's a stacking and unstacking. What is very common is a kind of a haphazard. No. So if I'm performing it, I'm here. But control down, open. But now in the beginning, this can be quite a lot for the wrist extension. If this is your case, you fake it. You fake it. You just go through the movement. Go through the movement without even doing any weight. Put any load in it, which is what I did for many, many months in the beginning. I was like, how does this work, man? I can't put any weight on this. It hurts. So I just went through. All the weight is here in my legs, and I just did the movement. I just kept doing. And slowly over time, I was able to bring something else into it. You don't have to go that far with wrist strength work unless you have something really specific that you're doing. If you're a break dancer, capoeirista, or even do yoga, I advise that it should be a key part of your practice. But for other people, just so that, for example, it doesn't hurt, when you're on the floor. This is a good point to go to. Second movement, first-knuckle push-up. Very commonly performed, just not great, suboptimally. First-knuckle push-up, what we're going to have is like the lever. It should be more difficult when you get to the top. But what you'll often see is people start with their hands so far forward that I get here and the lever just gets easier. The lever I'm talking about is the load that's on here, okay? So how I want to start is always, and I do this for scapular push-up work as well, the shoulder starts at knuckle line. So it's not here, I start here. Why? Because if I start here and I push up, now look at my shoulder, my angle here. The maximal load for building the mobility in the first knuckle is going to be here, which means when I come down, I should be in a position here. Shoulder, knuckle line. The tempo we're looking for is about a 2-0-2-0. If you're not familiar with tempo, basically means I go up for a count of 2 seconds. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. Do not rest on the floor. If you do, you just lost all the tension and you lost the best part of your set. Okay? 1, 2, 1, 2, 0. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0. Working at this tempo. And even as you progress, the tempo does not change. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. The action, I'm pressing through the first 2 knuckles here. I'm not a boxer. I have very little to no experience in boxing, but I'm also aware that you want to be punching with around this area and not this area unless you want to get some wrist strain. So we're pushing through the first 2 knuckles. This is where it's focused, okay? These first 2. One thing I'll say about wrist work as well is I highly advise to develop yourself to do it on a hardwood floor. This is not to be like hard and cool, but basically it's very easy to condition the knuckles and condition the skins with a very easy modality, a harder floor. Use the hard floor where it's possible. Next one we'll go into the wrist fist rolling. Again, I'm starting with my shoulders stacked directly above the wrists here, and it's also a sequence of events. It rolls back. First here, I drop down to the elbows. I bring the elbows, the thumb towards the shoulder. We want to come down into complete flexion. If it's possible, even touch, but it's not a huge deal. As I come up, it goes back into the wrist. When I stack on top here, I'm on the 2 knuckles again. When I come forward, I have to lean my body forward. The button, unless you really can't do it, the button, which is here, must touch. It must touch. It must touch to here, which means maybe this position is very, very easy. But then when you get to here, it's like, oh my God. Yeah, of course, because the load is increasing, which means that perhaps it's better to start yourself, you know, a bit further back. It's very, very tight, but it's okay. So from here, I come up, and now, it's not so bad. Good. And if you need to, you can always adjust yourself mid-set. So here you can kind of shimmy forward if you really need to, shimmy backwards, come forwards, backwards, and come down. Just the one thing to really think of is that this action is happening, yeah? We want this radial and ulnar deviation in these positions. So it's not just, you know, I'm just rolling over my wrist. It's like, no, it's happening here. This is where it's happening. I do it here, and then it affects further up the chain. This is the intention, as I said again. It might not actually happen. Of course, it's not just coming from the wrist. But my intention, my idea, is that it's happening just from here. Now, if you want to progress, again, just increase the load. You can come down here to the toes. I find it easier if you are progressing to work with a wide straddle. This is quite useful. To come down here to the elbows, come up, lean it forward, and then come down again. Most importantly, just full range. Go through a full range extension and flexion. Good. Any questions about your wrists? Feel free to throw your mic on if you've got any questions.
Jason, can you hear me?
Yeah, got you.
I got a question about the second, I'm not sure how you call it, the finger push-up thing. Have you ever seen anyone that just couldn't progress it even though they tried like for months?
No.
Like there's a certain point of flexion and they just cannot go any further. Has it ever happened to you? Or is it just too few practice?
No, too little practice. That's it. Too little practice. If you tap every day on this part of your arm, every single day for 10 years, what's going to happen to this space in your arm? There will be an adaptation. If you believe in Darwin's theory of evolution, it will happen. But of course, the time that it takes to develop and the restrictions in place at the beginning are always going to be different. We are beautiful little snowflakes. We have different movement experience, a different movement past, a different movement present, and there's a different movement future for ourselves in our minds as well. So one thing that you might see with people, if you have people working this, is that there really is not much at all. So what I encourage with these people is just to work on this idea, less of the strength work, and just get more of the mobility. So just start close here. What they can do, they bring it up as high as possible, and then they just try to load it a bit, and then come down. They come up. I have some people that can only come to here, no more than this. So for these people, I just encourage, you know, the stretching forward of this movement. Another very nice movement, if you are working on the actual, you know, the extension of your fingers, is just this idea where I roll from one side of the knuckle to the other. This is one thing I use as well, sometimes before I do the first knuckle push-ups, just to kind of iron it out. This is the same concept. It also works. It works with the foot, you know. Same idea. You can work with the toes here if you're preparing for this type of work. I use this movement quite a bit with people.
Cool, okay. I mean, the reason I ask, like, there's lots of talk of when you talk about, like, let's say middle splits.
Yeah.
There's talk about that. Some people have like some structural setup that they just couldn't do the middle split, like Emmett Lewis said, or I don't know who. So I was wondering if that would be the case in wrist as well, but maybe not. I don't know.
In my experience, for example, here's one thing as well. I mean, the wrist, you're dealing with, you know, quite small, in some cases, very malleable connective tissue and joints. And when you're dealing with something like a hip is like, you know, a football in like a huge joint hole, it can be a lot more difficult to manipulate. The connective tissue is much more dense. It's connected to many more different things in the body. So of course, if there is a heavy restriction in there, it can be a multitude of reasons. However, something like the shoulder joint, for example, we know now, I didn't put it in the resource, but a great book that Idor mentioned many times by Dr. Kirsch, Shoulder Injury, the Prevention and the Cure by Dr. Kirsch. The shoulder joint is basically malleable. The stimulus that you give it, hanging, this traction force will change the shape of your glenohumeral joint. It will create more space in there. However, there is always the case of movable restriction and immovable restriction. I think I even wrote it down. Movable stuff, yeah, you can keep going for days, and after a few years, it will definitely develop. However, one guy who I mentioned previously that I worked with, he has screws in his wrist because he completely busted his wrist open trying to do a muscle up with no experience whatsoever, and he basically just blew his wrist. He had an injury that the wrist surgeon had seen once in his lifetime, and they had to screw his whole wrist back up. So in his case, of course, it may be the case as an immovable restriction, but normally it's going to be trauma-based. But as regards to anatomical, it's not something I've personally come across or heard of. I think the wrist joint can be quite malleable and giving, depending on the stimulus you give it.
Thank you.
So end range shoulder circles, I'm just going to go quickly through these. It's a really useful tool, and there's two different ways that I like to do it. The end range shoulder circle, essentially you're going to be working against a wall. You can also do this in open space, it's not a problem, but a wall gives a really good feedback. So one of the things essentially is I'm working with the maximal range of the shoulder in the end range. You might be familiar from the work of Dr. Andrea Spina and his CARs, the circular articular rotations. It's of this theme. So one of the things that's very important is that it's, quote unquote, strict. Strict basically means is that, I'll just quickly show you and get into the details in a moment. When I'm bringing the arm around, that I'm not compensating by turning my body. I do not compensate. So what can happen is if you're just in space here, one thing, you just kind of move your body around. And the second thing is that you don't really go into the end range, which is why the feedback of the wall is great. Most people, nearly everyone, the main restriction is going to happen when you pass the complete vertical position and you come to the back. So for example, you might be like, oh, this is fine. I can stand right next to the wall, no worries. And then here it's like, oh, I have to turn. In this case, now man, you have to start here. Start here. Always stay at the level of the biggest restriction at this point. Now, there's two different ways I like to do this. One way is essentially retracted, and one's extended. One version, I really lock and pull the shoulder down into the joint. I personally found this helped me more with developing stability in terms of working with the scapula, helping hold or helping pull the glenohumeral head into the socket. So this is the retracted version that I do. But one thing that is always going to be the case with the hand position, you follow first of all with the thumb. You're always following with the thumb in this position. Shoulder is pulled in. Don't compensate here. Stay tight in the abdominals. And when I get to here, you should reach a block. If you do not reach the block and you think, oh, it just goes, it's because you let your chest open. It's your chest. It's not you have amazing shoulder mobility. It's you compensated with something else in your body. Don't do it. Stay tight, stay down, keep your form rigid, lock into here. And when you feel it, go in for the scap, man. You feel the scap squeezing, contracting in the back, pulling that shoulder in. This is the great feeling from here. The thumb is still facing forward. I keep the tempo consistent. Now, I gave you a minute of time, I believe, for back and forward. It should equate to anywhere between 5 or 10 reps. Depends how slow you take it. You shouldn't do more than 10. If you do more than 10, you are going too fast. Even if you do 3 and it takes you a minute backwards, absolutely fine. The longer, again, for this, stability, time under tension, experience in the end range. Leading with the thumb, pulling in, I hit the block, I internally rotate as much as possible until it comes around to the back. It gives me the range. So the transition position that we're working with is that point where it goes over the top part. So here is the transition position. Just smash these pictures up. I come here, here, and I get here, and now I'm turning it inwards, and I come down across the back, and I repeat. The backwards is going to be the same. Many people will find that the backwards is easier than the front way. It's regardless. You should do both equally. The second version that I like to use is quite simply the same idea, but I'm working with shoulder extension and pushing upwards, like you would do with a lot of your handstand work. So normally, if I'm doing this just for morning practice to look after the stability of my shoulders, I'll do it retracted and in. If I'm going to do like some one-arm practice, one-arm handstand practice, or just some handstand stuff, and I want to get into my brain extension, pressing through the floor, or likewise with people. In this case, I use the extended version here. The sensation is different on a biomechanical level. I don't need to read into the biomechanical differences. I know the feeling of how it feels different. I know the result afterwards, and I believe that these two different variations are both equally useful. So this is why I choose these two methods. The low-gait sequence is a sequence that I developed to build experience in the low-gait position. So what is the low-gait position? For me, I translate the low-gait position as the world between type of a resting squat or a rested position here, or halfway entering to the floor, the world between this and standing, okay? So low-gait is always going to be working down in this type of position, working through here, coming up and down and around on a transition, whether it's in this direction or forward, whether I'm balancing, whatever I'm doing, these things are going to be working with the idea of low-gait. Again, this routine is based around time under tension. Now you've got two choices that I gave, 5 count or 10 count. Maybe I gave some others. You can do anything in the middle. It basically refers to how much time you spend with each movement. Start at 5 count. If you're feeling brutal, go to 10 count. It can be a lot, okay? First very important thing, the starting position, we'll start with a 5-step horse stance, more or less. We'll actually probably go to 4-step. 5-step is a little bit wide. How do I count the steps? With the feet, I start the feet together. I maximally internally rotate so the heels go out, then external. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last one is always to parallel. So that was actually 4-step horse stance. I'm in 4-step now, okay? Let's repeat that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, straight, parallel feet. This will help develop the lateral mobility and stability of your ankles at the same time. Now, when I come down into my horse stance, I'm looking that if I have a stick, which I don't here, unfortunately, if I place it across here, it should not roll forward. If it's too much in the beginning, no worries, you can be a bit higher, but this down here is really where we want to get to. Now, we're working with a specific style of horse stance. This style of horse stance is actually one in which we've got anterior pelvic tilt. The other type of horse stance is posterior tilt. Has its place, but we're not using it right now, okay? Now, with the anterior pelvic tilt version, what we're also thinking about is keeping the knees slightly pushed out. It's not full on, pushing them out, but just keep them out. Just don't let them drop too much in. Now, just hang out, man. Just 5 counts. Count as a second. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what I do now, the weight shifts. This is so important. It is not just a leaning to the side. Where is my center of gravity? My center of mass. My center of mass is here. It stays here. And now I shift it. I shift it. I shift it. It comes over. I keep the flexion in this knee. Do not move the flexion. Do not straighten it. It's a different movement that comes later. So from here, I come across, and I just feel myself. My weight's here. 3, 4, 5. I slide across. Now the back foot can turn out around 45, no problem. The front foot is always face forward. 2, do not straighten the knee. Wait till you hit 3, 4, 5. I switch back, watch the feet change. Whoop, 45, parallel. I come down, now I come down into the pubu, or the drop stance. Now in this position, my load shifts forward. Why? Because I'm putting it down into this leg. Common mistake, especially with people who have good mobility. Do not let, or flexibility. Do not let them get away with it. This is what they will do. Oh yeah, this is easy, this is fine. So yeah, because you've loaded everything here. Of course it's easy for you. You're just in a passive half squat. Okay, try shifting your body weight to the front. Now it's happening in the front leg. Now we're building strength, now we're building mobility. Okay, I spend the time in this position. 3, 2, 1, I come up. The transitions are also very important. Feel the texture of the transition, not just, oh God, I can't. No, man. Okay. Breathe. Okay. Uncomfortable. Not so great. Good. From this, the next movement, as I come across the arms, and we go into the serpent. I have a ball from the back to the front. Now my weight is more around this side. It's not completely here rested. It's here. And I push the ball from the back to the front. Try to come up tall. So even if you're just here, you can still from here, come here, and just come up. Just come up all the way. Don't, for example, just come here and live life down here. Come all the way up, this position. You come down, all the way up. And again, if you're working for 5 count, you go 5 times, and you switch over to the other side. Notice this time now, it doesn't matter when you do it, but distinguish between rainbow, which is coming up and down, or sliding, which is staying low. 2 different textures of transition, okay? Of course, I come to the other side, I push from the back to the front, we work again 5 reps. This is good. Then I simply come back into my horse stance. I missed this out, but it's also at the beginning, which is the weight shifting. So in the beginning, I go from my horse stance to my weight shifting. This is just to feel the sensation of the changing weight from left to right. Yeah, that's basically the low gait sequence. It's the details are hugely important. The details are hugely important. One thing I'll mention with this routine and with the drop stance position or the pubu position, which should influence your stance in the beginning and influence your intention. Here's the intention. With everything, I'm doing exercises at the moment. I'm doing routines. I don't want to do exercises and routines for the rest of my life. I want it to contribute to my movement. So I do it in a particular way that it contributes to my movability through space. How do I do this? My drop stance should lead me in such a position, no matter how high or how low I am, that I can ultimately come to sit on the heel, which means if I start here, I'm never going to get to the heel. I'm never going to get, I'm too wide. If I start here, I'm never going to get to the heel. It's too wide or too narrow. What do I mean? Just around about here, if I come down here to my drop steps, whoa. Now I have a transition I can use. Now I can go into anything I want from this position, just for the sake of having this experience, bah. I use the heel. This is why it's done in a specific way and working with those dimensions. And it doesn't matter your mobility level. You can be right up the top, but you should still have in your mind the intention. You don't even have to fulfill the intention. Am I in a position that if I had the range, I could go to the heel? If the answer is yes, perfect, work with this model. If the answer is no, still going to be good for you, but you're missing out time that you could be practicing a pattern as well as getting the side effects of the mobility, etc., etc. So through practicing the patterns, developing movement patterns, this is what I mean by the side effect. Yeah, this is time under tension, developing mobility, etc., etc. But that stuff is a side effect. It doesn't bother me so much. Oh, you've got 3 or 5 count. 3 count's easy. Start with 5 count. 5 count and work up to 10 count. Okay, good. Dragon squat, isometric, very simple. But again, the idea has to be the same. When I'm stepping down into dragon squat, one thing I would like you to do as well is practice the transition. What does this mean? The transition is the weight shifting. Like, where is my weight? My weight is now more on the right foot. My weight is now more on the left foot. Okay? So when I come down into the dragon squat, I transfer my weight. Now it's here. How do I know it's here? Because this foot is now weightless. I trace the line behind. The knee must come under, and I don't care what your mobility restrictions. I've seen really restricted people with a good bit of encouragement get the knee under, okay, without breaking anything. Get the knee under and sit, 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 sit until you sit on the heel. This is very important. Sit on the heel. Why? Again, because this is a 0 point. I establish certain 0 points. This is a 0 point, passive squat is a 0 point. If you have a usable handstand, look, that can also be a 0 point. Standing is a 0 point. A 0 point is a position that offers a high potential for movement transition. So squat, of course, I can do so much stuff in the squat. I can come into the floor, I can come out of the floor, I can stand up, I can move around. Dragon squat as well. If I build this 0 point, boom, I can use it for whatever I want to use it. I can work into another dragon squat, blah, blah, blah. But it has to be done with this intention in the beginning. The transition, coming around, sit, turn into the forward leg. Forward leg is here, I turn into it. This increases the constriction, which is something desirable. If you want to increase the intensity even more, very, very simple. So this is my front standing leg. All I would do to increase the intensity is try to bring the foot on the same line as the front foot. So it means I basically come around even more. Instead of coming here, I reach a bit further. I reach here, place the weight, and then I would come down and sit here at this point. Okay? And the other option to increase the constriction, of course, some people do it very, very wide here, but to increase the constriction, keep close. Get really tight. The tighter, the better. Lock it in, sit, hold your position. If you get bored with a dragon squat, which is I can understand, it's just an isometric hold position, some very simple variations you can use is just working with closed chain transitions. So the closed chain sequence is essentially that it just repeats over and over again. So dragon squat is quite easy for its closed chain transition. What we'll do, you just start here, even if you just have a small space. I feel my weight is here, it's light, I slip down, I come here, I unwind, and I stand up. I come down the other side, hold it for a few moments, touch the heel, mark it, and I come back up. You can travel with this, or I can just go back in the other direction. This way, hold for a moment, feel the transition, stabilize, and come back up. So I can spice up your dragon squat a bit. And ultimately all of these isolated patterns, they all will follow in integrations. They will all follow in integrations. But I like in the beginning to show just some isolated elements, and eventually you'll find it. You'll be moving through space, exploring Low-gait, and oh yeah, dragon squat can go here. Rather than just say, hey, here's a pattern, copy the pattern. You're going to learn through that. You learn how to do a pattern. You're not going to learn how to sequence yourself. You might get some ideas, but if I just say, okay, you've got a dragon squat, you've got a poo-poo, and you've got a floor entrance and exit, take 1 minute and make something happen. You can only use those 3 movements. Now you're empowered. Now you have something that you can create yourself. Sequences are very, very nice. I give people sequences, but I do it with reservations, in all honesty. I prefer it when people send me a video and go, hey, remember that stuff we were practicing in the last program? So I just started practicing it for a few minutes, put it together, and this is what happened. This is what I try to bring people to. Upper body strength and mobility, scapular push-up. Get your scap push-up right from the beginning. Scap push-up. First of all, the only movement that happens in this movement is from in between your shoulders. When you set up in the scap push-up position here, it should just be a standard push-up position like this. It does not need to be some crazy boned out position. No, man, just like here. And in actual fact, for me, the hollow body or the scapular push-up, it's not this huge thoracic flexion thing like this. It's not at all. It's just a stabilizing of the upper torso in which three things are acting together. You have your the chest muscles, you have your serratus, and you have your lats. This kind of trifection. If you can lock all these in, it gets stronger and stronger. The most difficult one is the lats, and I'll show you why. I'll just do a quick t-shirt off thing. So from here, I'll just show you quickly here. When I'm in the scap push-up position, first of all, check out the scapula. One thing, I got a submission like this the other day, the scap push-up to here. You can't see it. But anyway, the shoulder blades should disappear. So this doesn't fly. This is not a top position of a scap push-up. That's the top position of a scap push-up. So you see the difference here? And it's not full on here. It's just only moves here. But that's it. That is now locked in. That is something I can build on. That is something I can put weight on. But this is going to crumble. What can happen very often is that when the person is coming down, first of all, the midsection sinks, but you see this in push-ups anyway. That's just a cue. Keep your abdominals tight. Keep the ribs down. So tight as in pulling the ribs downwards. And pushing with a straight elbow. So no flexing in the elbow as you come down, okay? This again is your brain tricking you. Oh, I'm getting closer to the floor. No, you're not. You're bending your elbows. So you are in the wrong place. Activation of the lats for people who are progressing a bit further with this. In the beginning, don't worry about it. But if you're progressing further, try to work with this idea from here. Okay, I'm in the top position, but now activate the lats. Pull the shoulders down. I don't know if you can see the difference there. As I come up, this is an inactive lat. I'm just using chest and serratus. If I can lock that in, the difference visually is very small, but it changes a lot. If I can lock that into my position, this helps very, very much with the scap push-up. Be strict with your 3-second tempo. No, yeah, it's 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3. No, it's not. It's 1, 2, 3. I don't mean to patronize anyone at all. It's just a case that very often with training, especially in the initial stages when you're not used to working with times and tempos, you're counting, your mental clock is just off. That's it. Your mental clock is just 1, 2, 3. Because it's difficult. You're counting with the feeling of your body rather than counting, actual seconds. So in the beginning, it can be handy to have a metronome. I do not advise people to use a metronome for the whole training. If you have to rely on a metronome to count, you have personal trust issues. Yeah, use it in the beginning just to get your tempo. But for example, like I can just kind of, I don't even have to count sometimes. I just do a movement. I'm like, yeah, 10 is around a minute. I look at the clock and it took me 1 minute and 1 second. This is just something that develops over time, your time management. And also I know where I'm cheating. So I'll finish a set and be like, that wasn't 10 seconds, man. You cheated yourself. You knew that. But I knew it. I chose part of me and I don't want to do the extra 2 seconds today. So get the tempo right. Second thing, please, as with your first knuckle push-up, start with the shoulders at least above the wrists, if not slightly forward. Backwards is a no-no. Again, because as I come up here, the strength lever gets easier. I want to get the point that when I'm here is the maximal load. So I always advise people to start the same with the handstand kick up, by the way, kicking up to a handstand. If you're starting here with a kick up to a handstand, Good luck, okay? Good. So from here, I start in this position, come up, 1, 2, 3. Come down, touch the shoulder blades. You'll find many people in the beginning, perhaps yourself, simply cannot touch the shoulder blades, even in this loaded position. If this is you, what I would advise you to do is to do these on your knees. If you really have an issue with getting maximal protraction and also touching the shoulder blades, get someone to film you, get a friend to stick €5 between your shoulder blades, and if it falls out, you don't get to keep it, okay? So from this position, you come down, they should touch and squeeze without the compensation here. It should stay locked out. And once you've got that position, then this is the time that you should start adding the load a little bit, okay? You've got 5, very standard. This will serve you for a long time. 5 reps of 3 seconds. Why will it serve you for a long time? Because the progression is intense, okay? Because you start working into the world of tuck-planche. The progression is essentially when you know that your scap push-up is on point. Do not skip the stage, because this is really fundamental. When you know it's on point. What you can start with first of all, before you start with bringing the knees in, is come to here, start working your scap push-ups then with an inclination. This is what I give people. So they lock, forward, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you see the range is coming from the toes. I'm just pushing the toes back and forward. This is one way to start progressing into the tuck. Again, be mindful that when you come here, it's not like 1, 2, 3. If this is, take a step back, do the groundwork, okay? Next progression, as I come here, I slide. You can do it on the toenails, or you can put something under your feet. Just bring it in. Try to get the knees to at least forearm. If they're back here, the progression is too difficult, okay? You need to step back. Other thing that can happen is this. Oh, look, I've got a tuck-planche position. No, you haven't. You're just on the road to a forced handstand, press handstand. Try to keep your backside at the same level as your shoulders. Record yourself, watch it again. Even, for example, you're coming in here in the beginning, okay, a bit of just to get it in and back down again. This is okay, but know that you're doing it. If you are using some assistance, for example, I can just high here so I can get it in here. If this bridges the gap for you, go for it, okay? But ultimately, what you do, I'll just show you a set. I'm working here, I lock in. When it comes in, the inclination forward, you have to come forward. If you're working towards tuck-planche and you're just not getting there, just lean forward just a few centimeters more. I promise you'll find it, okay? So I come here. I'm never going to get off the floor here. I'm never going to get off the floor. Okay, where is it? Now. Okay, now it's off the floor. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Step back, down, up, elbows locked. 3, 2, 1. Step back, lock. 3, 2, 1. I can put the foot here, for example, or even a progression. I can shoot it straight back. And this is how this simple movement will take you very, very, very far. It can always be developed. Scap push-up. AG reps and hold. We're working with shoulder extension, okay? So shoulder extension, this is such a fundamental, such a simple movement. But again, it will lead to places if you chase the progressions. We have the same type of body form, similar to as in the push-up. We're working with straight line idea, so we've got tension that's happening all the way from the toes with pointed toes. The knees are locked out, so that means I have tension in the quadriceps here. We use this variation at the moment with the hands pointing backwards, just for the width. I'm sitting around about here. I don't need to come so close. Too wide is also not going to be what we're looking for. We're working with hands backwards to encourage external rotation of the shoulder, and it also then helps. You'll feel the scap working better. I also use forward hand variations for a different reason. You can check it out. but we work with the backwards hand variation at the moment. Really, really simple. As you come down, shoulders down, retract, squeeze the glutes. As you bone it out, just this position. It's not a back extension movement. It's not squeezing my back. This is not what we're using it for. We're using it to develop the shoulder extension. So if anything, think of pushing the hand backwards along the floor, okay? So I work from this position. As I come up, it's 3, 2, 1. When I come down, I just touch, straight back in. 3, 2, 1, touch. 3, 2, 1. It's not a bouncing, boom. It's not this, and it's not a resting on the floor. Where possible, maintain the depression of the shoulders. It means when I come down here, don't shrug. Just keep them down. Down. 3, 2, 1. You can increase this if you need to increase the intensity of it. At the moment, you've got 15 seconds of under tension, 5 reps of 3 seconds. You can build that up towards 30 seconds under tension. So what I would do normally for me, I don't go above 6 reps of 5-second holds. So 5, 6, 30 seconds time under tension, and you can work with this idea. If you want to change the angle slightly, what I can do is put my feet on something elevated. I use these for now, but it's actually, the elevation would be a bit more. And basically what you'll see is now when I work the AG hold, when I work the movement, the shoulder angle here is now larger. So before, I was working with the shoulder angle here. That was my maximum. Now, it opens up to here. And of course, if I use an elevation higher, then you get to build the strength in the different areas of shoulder extension. There's more to it as well, but it's not necessary for now, but that's just some variations you can make. Changing the time under tension, changing the angle of the shoulder by using elevation under the feet. QDR rotational push-up progression. So I have to thank, first of all, it was Ido Portal who put out a lot of the progressions for these Floreo type movements that I used myself. And the video itself does quote Ido as being an influence for that. There's some details and things that I like to add that I think help some people. So we'll start with the first progression and then we'll just mention a couple more. I won't go much further until anyone asks me to. First of all, start and finish in the squat. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a transitional movement. So I don't want to just, finish somehow on my ass or just standing or however. I want to always start with my feet in the squat, and I always come back to the squat, my 0 point number 1, my squat. When you start a movement, when you're practicing, keep the hands on the floor. Why? Because it gives you more of an understanding of consistency. The same with the kick up. For example, if you're doing a handstand kick up and every time you're doing this all the time, it's going to be very difficult to know the exact power calibration because you might be entering the floor at a slightly different angle with a different amount of pressure. So just keep the hands on the floor. Same for the QDR push-up. My hands are just round about feet width. It doesn't have to be so. I kind of just want a position where it's like, yeah, here should be good, okay? Gripping the floor with the hands, make sure they're hands that you want to put your body weight on. Now with the first progression, what you'll get a lot of the time is people, they think, okay, head of the hands, they read the instructions, the elbow has to go to the hip, so just kind of touch the hip. Nah, you have to load it, unfortunately. So bring yourself forward. It's rotational at the same time. When you find the hip, watch what happens with my back foot here. So when I work with this position, when I want to get really on top of there, I don't stop here. I have range built into this flexion. Whenever you have flexion in a major joint in the body, it's potential for movement. But here, if I extend it out, there's not much more potential for movement because everything's extended. But if I'm here, I can use the extension of this leg, and it can throw me wherever I want it to throw me. So when you start developing on the first progression, when you come to this point, just try extending, pushing that back leg to really get you deep into the position. And likewise, when you come back to the squat, straight back into the next rep. When you extend, make sure you don't start sliding the feet. The hands and the feet in the first progression stay exactly where they are. They do not move. I'm negotiating myself around these 4 points. So the set would look like this, and over. If you have a lot of difficulties in the initial stages, you do your practice like the rest of us. That's it. You have to practice it. The QDI rotational push-up is one of those beautiful movements that, with many locomotion patterns, in the beginning, it's going to be conditioning. It's going to be conditioning. It's going to be building an understanding of what should be, in reality, an efficient support and even efficient pushing mechanic. But the fantastic thing about the most efficient pushing mechanics is that first you have to learn them, and when you're learning them, you're not doing them efficiently. So it's more difficult, and there is a benefit. It means that through building the pattern in an inefficient way in the beginning, because you don't understand the mechanic fully, you will, the side effects. You will get more conditioned. Your tissues will be more resilient. You will get certain adaptations, in strength and stability of the shoulders and things like this. So when you're struggling in the beginning, all you got to think about is your money going in that piggy bank. Money going in that piggy bank. I'm investing. I'm investing. I'm investing. I'm investing. Until the point where really the kid in the hands. So when you start developing the pattern, I should have, okay, here, the foot slides back and comes around. And if I've been patient enough and I've been building through the progressions, what will happen is that I don't have to try to get it up. Because when the foot comes around, what happens? It's a counterbalance. It's a counterbalance. And it pulls the other side up. Try not to force the foot up. It's a very common thing because, it can be a very beautiful movement and be, I just want to get the feet off the floor. I want to get the feet off the floor. This is really a case of, the classic, you do not do it. It does it. It's like balancing the handstand. If you're trying really to force yourself into balance, you won't find it. It's that moment where people are like, oh my God, I felt it. I felt it. This is what you're searching for with this Canada Hens progressions. So one last thing I'll say with that is also in the same breath, don't hold yourself back from progressions. This basically means, spend time with the foundations definitely, but at some point you got to jump and you got to fall. You will fall, and just get used to falling in this weird position. So at some point you have to just go for the, okay, foot's going to come off. Okay, it's coming off. Okay, okay, whoa. Okay, this has to happen at some point. So just find out where you are and take a little step into the unknown when it's needed. So the next thing we'll look at, very simple, tabletop isometric. You've got two 15-second holds if you're using all fours. So if you've got nothing off the floor, but one 15-second hold each side if you're working with something off the floor. Now, if you're really restricted, especially in shoulder extension, you can start just working with this progression. The main thing, depression. That's it. Yeah, not the sad depression, but of the shoulders. Resist the force of gravity. So I just push here. And what I would do in the beginning, if it's just here, get used to getting a foot off. Work for 15 seconds here, 15 seconds, whichever one you want to do. Just start getting used to what you're essentially doing is resisting rotational force. Something that very often is overlooked in training, especially like core training. It's this rotational force when your body wants to rotate and you fight against it. This develops a lot of stabilization throughout the body. So if you can, even from this position, just start to feel, you can see my back hand here, I'm just tapping, tap. It's very, very fine work. Don't go in for like, whoa, because you'll just fall. Take your time, yeah, progress. Just like, okay, tapping. Oh, whoa, I can feel it, yeah. And even with one toe on and one finger on, it makes a difference. The ideal way, if we're progressing through, get yourself up into the position here. It should be held with the strength of your posterior chain. So the strength of your lumbar spine, strength of your butt muscles, your glutes, as opposed to just pushing off the floor and kind of like boning out. That's quite specific about this movement. It's a posterior chain movement as well as working with shoulder extension. The progressions, as are in the video, again here, as soon as you take the foot off, you'll feel the hip wanting to drop. This is when you fight the rotational force. Keep it up. Stay in the bridge position. Even if the foot is down here, no worries, but don't let the hip give in. Okay? Likewise, with the arm, what can happen is that we go into this position. And then try to keep the same position, but my arm is just here. Okay? Just floating here, I'm working with that idea, extension. If you can take it to the position, find it slowly, push more and more. Wow, push more through the scap. I bring the hip up, I've got that here, and I work the position here, and I hold it for the 15 seconds. If you've got space, you can progress this to the table walk. Very, very simple locomotive pattern. Two ways you can do it. The first one I call the crab walk, which is essentially the first variation, but with your butt lower down. So here, the crab walk, when I'm walking, it's basically a traveling low table. I push back from shoulder extension and I pull with the foot. Pull, pull. And then backwards you can practice as well. One of the things that you want to focus on is getting the coordination right. And if you're working with the table, again, just keep high here. Push, push. And you'll notice that when I'm working here, there's no rush about it. Why? Like why do I want this? How does this improve my movement? I want to spend more time. I want to invest more time. Take your time. So with the movement here, savor it. It's like, wow, oh wow, this one, yeah, I feel it more. I have to think about where I put my hand because when I put the finger, get interested in all these finer points, especially if you have mostly had, for example, like a more fitness practice in the past or something. There's more of a mentality of like, you just get it done. You get it done, it works. Yeah, it does work. If your goal is just something more abstract, like building muscle, or if it's just, no, I just want to build strength. You can very often zone out with these things and just do it. But when you want to explore your movement, the texture of your movement and how you're actually moving tends to take a little bit more time, and it's worth spending a bit more time. One thing I'll say with the upper body strength and mobility, because we've just got the movements in there, 2 to 4 rounds, it's all body weight. Keep your rest periods short. Time your rest periods. This is, of course, you can do it quite relaxed and just go through your day, but when you set the timer on, and then when you see the clock turn, you got 75 seconds to 90 seconds rest here. So when your clock turns to 60 seconds, that means you stand up and you start shaking yourself out, that by the next 15 seconds, by 75 seconds, you're ready to go. Or if you need just another moment to think or take a breath, that's what those extra 15 seconds are for. It's not about being militaristic and get it done. It's for 2 reasons. It's to help the training effect, so the adaptations of the body, i.e. types of conditioning, etc., and also for time management. You'd be like, oh, that program took me like 3 hours to do. I don't really want to do it again. It's like, no, actually it takes like 1 hour and 15 minutes, even 45 minutes, but you didn't stick to the rest periods. So this is why they are important. Lower body complexity, one of my favorite subjects, because I did nothing like this in the past. And when I started exploring it more, it gave me huge optionality and increased my movement potential hugely. And I invested a lot in it. And these are some of the really basic fundamental movements that I practiced for years. Like, I don't care who you are. You can practice your sissy squat for years until you get your sissy squat down so that you can, with control, go from sissy squat down into a low bridge. There's still stuff you can do, okay? So don't underestimate the sissy squat. How should the sissy squat be done? I'll give some advice here, very, very simple. The most important thing, I'll also go through some regressions, but most importantly, you come naturally onto the toes as you descend. It is not, I go onto the toes and then I come down. No, this is just a side effect. It happens as a course of the movement. The main thing, and of course, it says in the video, I am resisting the natural kind of tendency to break in the hips here. Then it becomes something completely different. It's more like it's an eccentric, but not in the elongated position of the hip flexor. This is what we want. Because actually, if we can build what the load that this can take, the load from the hip flexor and going through the quads as well, you get a bow form. And the bow form eventually leads you right down into the low bridge. But the intensity, the information must be built there with a certain form, and the form is not breaking at the hips. Facilitate this by keeping the glutes tight and by keeping the abdominals tight, but specifically with the abs, again, it's tight and holding the ribs down. So we're not extending open this way, because I can tense my ribs, my abdominals here, but I'm in extension, okay? Keep it down. I even have almost like an idea for slight posterior tilt. It's not mega, but just because I've got the glutes tight, it just brings me into that position. And as I drop down, I work down. I'm not sure what the tempo is. Perhaps we have an isometric pause in the bottom. Yeah, we do. Just 3, 1, 1, 1. Very simple. 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. Work with that 1 second hold in the bottom. 3, 2, 1. Experience it. 1 as you come up. Now, as I come up, the tension should be on for the whole of this movement. What does this mean? It means that as I come down, I'm staying tight. When I come up, I push the heels into the ground. Quadricep locks out, glute locks out. 1 second, and I go straight back in. So it looks like this. 3, 1, 1, up. Squeeze 1, straight back in. 3, 2, 1. 1, straight back up, squeeze 1. That's not so great the day after you did front squats. Whoa. So this essentially just descends lower, 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 lower. Now, if you have some issues at the beginning with the stability element, no problem to use a wall. But what do I mean by use a wall? I mean, you just put your finger against the wall. Do not hold on top of something. It's too much. You don't need it. Especially if you work with people, even if they're more elderly, because if you're holding on top of something, it just completely changes the tension of the pattern. You know, you've got one side that's lighter than the other. Elderly population, if you want to use this movement, if you think it will be beneficial for them, you just take it so shallow. That's it. Something even if you have a knee injury or something, you can still work just here and lock out. This is why the lockout is important, because then we're really in the VMO for the knee stability. From here, lock out. This is enough, and I can have my fingers on the wall, but no problem. But with your sissy squat, you can work it nicely into the sissy squat with the hole, which is really, really nice. It's a way from entering from the world of the up to the world of the down. And all I need for this one, I first must just have an accessible sissy squat that I can touch the floor. And what I would prefer is not that you go straight for the floor. It has this kind of capoeira feel to it. It's like, yay, boom, and then I go in, okay? So I'm coming down. As I drop the first progression, I can use a touch off the floor and come up. And I come down to the other side, come down, touch, hand assistance and come up. If I want to go all the way in, I come down, touch, I come across, I look through the legs. Hello. And I come back. You don't have to have a beautiful hole for this. It's absolutely fine. Just come down, touch, and you can just do half a hole as well. But that's enough. And then you go back down and you work the other side. Very, very simple floor entry from bipedal to quadrupedal, which is a nice transition. With the sissy squat as well, you can work and you can change the tempo slightly. I will go up to 6-second eccentric and 2-second hold in the bottom position if I'm conditioning, or sorry, if I'm trying to build and condition the range. And in this case, I would drop the reps. I'll drop the reps just to 5. And I would, increase the time on tension. But for example, when I do the sissy squat now, when I practice it, I do at the moment sissy squat down into low bridge and then just up. And for me, because of the time under tension that it involved and the intensity, I just do 3 reps. It's great. It means that I train in the beginning to get a movement that is extremely intense and then requires only 3 reps. And this for me is more my training perspective now. I want to earn a movement, for example, like a Scapular press. If I can do my Scapular presses, I don't really need to do any handstand press at all. The handstand press goes out the window. And also I don't have to do so much compression work because I'm working compression while I'm doing that. And this is how you start to be more economical with your time and your programming. So when people are like, how do you get all this training and stuff in? It's like, well, because most of the other stuff I don't do because I don't need to do it because I already did it. This is the important thing. If you invest in it in the beginning, this is the basic pension fund, right? Like, why do you invest in your pension now? So you don't have to look for the money in the future. This is the perspective, and this is why we want it to be a sustainable perspective as well. It looks towards the future. Single leg reach. Again, this is another movement that I've been using this movement since 2012, 2013. 7 years I've been using single leg reach. Of course, in different variations. In the beginning, if you're not used to single leg hinging work, it can be a great challenge for you, especially for stability and balance. One of the main things I will recommend, always try to work with a locked knee if there is no problems with instability. For some people, it's so unstable, it's just not so safe. If it feels safe and you're comfortable to do so, work always with a locked knee. This is my perspective. I have my reasons, I won't get into it now. But if you're working with a locked knee, it means that also the quadricep is tight to stabilize the knee. VMO is working in here. In the top position, my glute is also tight. My abdominals are tight. This is quite just classic stuff. Now, I hinge as low as possible. And what I actually think about is I'm pulling towards the floor. When I think of pulling, quadricep activates, especially the types of muscle I that work with compression. I pull into the bottom position. If I'm just here, absolutely fine. Don't let the lumbar spine round, okay? We're going for hamstring. For this movement, we're going to the hamstring and also conditioning the tendons of the back of the knee. So for this particular movement, I try to keep my chest up. If you really want to make it beautiful and it's okay for you, you can also use the extension, like push out through the back toe to this position. This is absolutely fine. Now, when I come up, how do I start? I think I push the heel into the ground. Pushing the heel activates the back of the knee, hamstrings, and I'm already in the glute. I'm already in the glute. I lock out. Squeeze again, 1 second, straight back in. I come down, 1, 2, not sure of the tempo, but probably got that. Squeeze of the quadricep here can also help. I come up, but if you lose your balance, no problem at all, jump back on the wagon. For the progressions, first of all, make sure that you're performing the movement without this opening of the hip. This can be a compensation, just like it makes you feel like you're getting lower, but actually you're just turned out. The opening, closing of the hip that I'm referring to is this position. This is closed. We've got a 90-degree angle. And then when I open it, but it opens. But actually, this is the progression that you'll work with. If you get bored of the reach or it gets too easy, start working with open, closed hip progression. Whoa, it's a mind blower. So basically, I would face myself in a mirror, I come down into the reach, and then I make sure I bend myself at the knee so I can see my foot. Yeah? And I want the foot to be pointing directly up. What you'll get in the beginning is that the foot is here, because generally more people are externally rotated in the hip. So from here, I try to see the foot here. Okay, I can see my foot. Now what I want to happen here, I want to open the hip, whoop, back, and then I close again, and then I come up. And then that is your rep. What does it look like from the side? Open down here, close hip, open hip, close hip, come back up. Reach, close hip, open hip, close hip, and come back up. And this will start to teach you just the difference of pelvic position in relation to your single leg work. Goes further than this as well, but this normally can keep you occupied for time. I'll quickly touch on one thing that someone contacted me about, which is knee pain. If you experience knee pain while doing any of these types of movements, because they are quite knee heavy, or knee focused, quite deliberately, for the main reason that people often have issues with knees. And one of the best ways to be able to deal with that or to develop defenses against that is a little bit of sip of the poison. Too much of the poison, you will poison yourself, you know? Get the dose just right, and it will consistently improve. How do I know what is the right dose? First of all, you use your feeling, like the sensations that are being created and feeding back into your body. But even these at the same time, you know, many people, they experience what is essentially just stress. They think it's pain. So this idea of just listen to your body is complete bullshit, because it's just like, you know, if someone is speaking a foreign language to me, just listen to what he says. What do you mean? I can't understand. Yeah, he's speaking, but I don't understand because I don't understand the language. It's the same with the body. If you're not familiar with the sensations, then you cannot translate the idea so well. What is the solution for this? Experience and sensitivity. If you have knee pain with these movements, go sensitively, use your common sense, perhaps don't go as deep, use the assistance with the wall, like I said, with the sissy squat, with the reach, just don't go as deep, and start slowly mapping what is possible and what is not possible. And this is part of a whole idea I call, you know, very kind of, you know, knowing yourself. But not so much knowing yourself as much as also where are you? Because knowing yourself is a bit of a problem because you're always changing. But if you're not always changing, well, you will be on a physiological level, either deteriorating or becoming more robust. But also, if you are accepting movement into your life, if you are able to be adaptable, able to change, able to experience and put yourself in unknown situations and learn from them, you will build in strength. You will continue to move along. If you try to resist movement, only bad things happen. This is across the board, not just physical practice, and everything. If you can't change with the world, this is where you get people very angry, not just old men or old women, but people, I don't like that, that's new. It's like, well, stuff changes, man. Like, movement is the underlying fundament of change, and for me, movement is the underlying condition of everything. So if you want to know yourself, it's better for me to say, where are you? So no, at this point in time, do I know exactly where my restrictions are? Do I know exactly where my potentials are? For example, do you know at the moment that you should not be going so deep in the sissy squat? This is something that you can learn. Do you know, perhaps you do the kid in the hands and like, do you know, actually, nah, man, you can jump to the next progression. Go for it, go for it. Like, this for me is more the idea of where are you as opposed to know yourself, because it always changes from stage to stage. So that's just the idea with knee pain. Thinking about the figure 4 squat. Figure 4 squat is a really, really nice one, and it ties well with the 1990 rockover. Figure 4 squat, there's two things that we're focusing on. One is starting to work with the external rotation of the leg in this specific position that you see, you know, in many, many things. And it comes quite sensitively with this movement. So the figure 4 squat is so named because you basically got this type of 4 position. Also a great old school wrestling move, the figure 4. So from here, just come down as low as you can. You do not need to go any deeper than what is physically possible. Don't start forcing like that. And here is the thing. This is my range. If I'm here, this is my range. This is not my range. This is just me bending forward towards the ground and getting tricked by my own body, okay? So keep yourself up. I don't care if you just come down to here. This is enough. Don't start going into this world of essentially delusion, okay? So when I work with this movement, so you get a full range, once again, the same with the sissy squat, the same with the single leg reach. Start from a locked out position, keep the glute locked, legs tight from here, and as I drop down, I keep my chest up. I should feel proud. I should just feel like, yeah, bring it on. Not like, oh, this is difficult, okay? Stay up, coming down as low as you can. Check the tempo, but I do believe you've got a couple second isometric hold. 1, 2. One thing you can do as you come up as well is slightly push the leg, the standing leg, against the top leg. This will just activate the glute a bit more, and because you're in a position of stretch, you're essentially working mobility. You don't need to go crazy like pushing it down, but just some slight activation is fine. Progression for this movement, staying up high, is that you come down until you have no more, and when you can control it, what happens? The heel just starts to peel off the floor. It peels, and then I come to a sit. And then when I come back up, I push the heel back into the floor, and I squeeze myself back up. Try not to push it too much, so it's like, and bottoming out. You don't want to bottom out. You're essentially, as I said before, you're not building any information in that range, which is what we're trying to do. So when you perform this movement and you're looking to progress, when you get to the difficult point, put the brakes on. Classic eccentric cue. You imagine that you have a huge braking system in your leg and you're pushing. So even though you're descending, you're actually thinking about pushing when it gets to that difficult point. So for example, here, I'll let you know whereabouts it is. I'm coming here, here, here. Now, as soon as it starts to peel, okay, now I start to push. Now I'm pushing, pushing, building it. Here, even more pushing. And then here, I just keep the tension on a bit. I don't want to relax completely, just slightly on. And then I really push back up. Record yourself, and the telltale cue, if you're missing information, is this, which you'll see all the time with pistol squat, okay? This is what you'll see. Here, here, here. Oh, yeah, you did it, but when you got to here, this is no information whatsoever. You're just stressing out for no good reason. So if you're going to those bottom ranges, put the brakes on, push against it, build the information. And here's a beautiful thing. If you're going there, you know where that position is. It's a position that's difficult, simple, that's it. And it always is. And this is the truth. This is why I always say as well, such a simple practice. If you don't train with truth with this, like knowing that you're actually doing it, you'll be okay. But if you train with truth, then you'll find the true beauty in these movements. And what do I mean by beauty? For me, a friend actually mentioned it to me the other day. I've worked with for some years. Quite a bit younger. In the beginning, he just wanted, to do movement. I want to do movement. And not quite sure. I just saw some videos. Yeah, man. He used to send me pictures of himself squatting on the chair, like fuck the chair, like movement. Okay, cool. I just gave him some things. I gave him a program. Within a month, he was like, oh, I don't know. And he went to work with a certain movement teacher, and he came back after a month. And he said to me, you know what I realized? I don't like doing this movement thing. I was like, good, fantastic. At least now you know exactly what you want. However, he recently has moved away, had a lot more experience, and he came back to me and he says, I gave him another routine to test out for me that I'll be providing soon. And he said, you know what? It's changed. Like I'm starting to notice all the small things in these movements that I don't necessarily like it, but I don't have to like it. It's not about that. It's just this difference in intensity, the texture of the intensity. If I slow it down in this point, if I hold it for 2 seconds instead of 1 second. So these small details that I mentioned, they are really, really important. And it becomes your own investigation. So a bit of a tangent there, but I just want to emphasize the perspective of my practice that I want to share with you is that it's never just a movement. There's always something more. He was speaking about as well, like, you know, movements of the hands. Like, of course, I can just do this at the beginning of my routine, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I can really also feel the texture of the fingers, feel the texture of the moving body, experience the different stresses, and learn from that, you know, physically and, you know, the whole package as well. All right. Last thing we'll look at for the lower body is the 90-90 rockover or the 90-90 circles. This is a progressive movement that goes to many nice places, so practice it well. First thing to make it clear is that what does the 90-90 refer to? One person messaged me on one of my posts and was like, he says call the 90-90, but your knee is not at a 90-degree position. First of all, it doesn't really matter. Second of all, it is, because it's the shin to shin angle, okay? So 90-90, we're working at the shin to shin angle here. But it is also okay if the back foot is in a little bit more. It's not a huge deal. The main deal is that it's a position where basically, if I sit here like this, like a normal position, my friend is shouting at me, I go, what? That's your 90-90 position. This is why it's a fundamental position. What did you say? What? Yeah, this is the position that we're looking for, movability. If you have knee stresses with this, it can be the case that you've got some tightness in the knees or really in the hips that is then causing torque in the knee. One thing you can quite simply do is just reduce the range that you come down. So normally for some people, it's like this leg here. If it's really an issue, I would just work not doing the rockovers or anything like that, but you can just work here. You can put some blocks under the knees for support. This just helps. And you can just work with like reaching forward, breathing. This is one. I also posted this in my story, but you can work here, and then you work just with some stretches on the other side, and then you work, you know, this way as well, reaching down, and this will help open it up. But once the knees are feeling okay and there's no issues with that, work yourself into the rockovers. The rockovers are really nice. Again, start yourself from here, drop them on the floor. The rockover, I'm sucking the knees in. I suck them in and I pull it round. It shouldn't feel just like a drop. Don't just let it drop, because here it's tight. Yeah? Hold the tightness. This is a compression. Hold it. Don't like, now it's gone. Nah, that's your friend. That's your friend. Go there. Okay, suck it in, come down. And you can even emphasize it. Of course, I'm using the arms as well for this type of counterbalance that I use. If you need to regress, you can basically just give yourself more space. The feet come out a bit further. So I just come here. The feet further away will be the regression. Progression, get your feet really nice and close so you feel it really squeezed up, really, really tight. If you play things that you have to be small, like BJJ, there's a good one, you get your knees right in there, this compression ability. I have people who work with this movement that do a lot of BJJ, and they've reported to me a lot of benefits they've seen in their game from being able to get the legs in. The progression is the 90-90 circle, which starts to turn into a locomotive pattern, although it's kind of like a boat stuck with the rudder to the side, just going around in a circle. But I'll show you a progression in a moment from that. This is now an integration of movements. First of all, I start in my 90-90. Remember, I just sit, bonk. Okay, here I am. I come up, completely up, not halfway up here. The knees go into the floor. I reach out with my butt to sit down. Where does it go first? I lean, butt touch. Okay? In this position, I do the rockover, and then I repeat. I come up, I switch the feet, reach out with the butt to meet the floor, and come down. This is very important. You're reaching out with your backside to touch down to the floor, as opposed to just dropping. Now, if this is uncomfortable for you on the knees, you do it on some carpet and stuff, first of all, a yoga mat. It's really great to condition the knees. You can definitely overdo it if you work this on a hard surface too much too soon, but I recommend it. I work this on concrete, not just for the fact of the conditioning, like physical, but also for my mind as well. Like many times you think it's worse than it actually is. And also, when you're working with a hard surface, it will make you more careful to find and map the knees better. What do I mean? As I come back, now there's very many different ways and places that I can roll on my knee, but I can actually find one. Here, like this, I can't hardly feel anything. Like if I come here to the side, okay, so this is not so well placed, then I start to feel the contact on the side. But the point I'm trying to make is you can always make these movements softer and more controlled. Softness is just the idea we use here for a certain model, as I spoke about before, the model of like what you actually want to do. Softness for this type of work can be a nice model to use. I don't want to be heavy. But also at the same time, I would say softness always with firmness, like a bamboo, rather than just like, yeah, just soft along. No, softness, but with like some, some whip to it, like something's a good texture. Progression for this, and I think I'll post this up soon because people have already been doing the 1990. But if you're ready for this progression, some of you very much well are, then you should understand it just from me doing it. So I'm just going to do it, and I'm not going to say anything else, and you can check it back in the video. That's the traveling 1990. Okay, so this is it can integrate with many other things as well, but the basic progression it goes up to is the traveling 1990, and I'll probably post it soon in my Instagram story, maybe on a post as well if people find it useful. Good. Just before we leave, because we've got like 5 minutes left, anyone got any questions they want to ask about the stuff we've gone through or anything else to ask myself? Just feel free to put yourself on mic. Yeah, okay.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Why did you do upper body strength first instead of lower body in the program?
Yeah, well, here's the basic idea of it. It could definitely be the other way around, not a problem. You can also mix upper body and lower body. This is perfectly fine. You can switch them in between. But in general, I mean, the way that I planned out with the pre-habilitation and preparation, we go through all the low-gait sequence and then dragon squat. And now, if you've just done your basic low-gait sequence and then you've done a drop set for dragon squat of 30 seconds each side, 20, 20, 10, 10. By the way, if this is too much, you can just do 15 seconds each side, no problem. And you've done that, and then you have to go into lower body complexity. It's like, okay. So this is why the routine is split in such a way, but you're perfectly right. We could have done the basic low-gait sequence, dragon squat isometric before the wrist mobility and end range shoulder circle, and then gone into lower body. Not a problem at all. And that's another thing, like feel free to split this routine up as you like and change things as you go. It's not a problem at all.
Just going to give it a try this week and see how it goes.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this stuff is written on paper like this. But this is not the type of program, no program is like, if you don't follow it exactly, it will not work. The point is to implement this into your personal practice, your daily practice. And you might think, I don't have a daily practice. I'm sure you do. I mean, if you wake up every morning, you make a coffee and you enjoy the smell and you make your coffee in a certain way, this is a practice. It's a habit that you do every single day. And over time, it changes. So this as well is something that eventually, I hope, that after 8 weeks of using this, it's not just going to be exactly the same. You will have adapted it to your life. You would have split it up. You would have added your own stuff. This is the complete point. Even the people who work with me with online support, I'm very, very strict about the things that I expose them to, certain types of movements. But at the same time, I never say to them, no, you must do it in this exact place, at this exact time. If I get video submissions from someone and, half of their program is done in the park and the other half is in the gym, I know that they've split their program. I'm not going to say, oh, you split your program, but it's all on one page. I don't give a shit. I just want the person to be experiencing those movements in however they see fit, but they do know that the way it's written on the paper is my perspective of optimum. However, optimum is no longer my personal goal. Like in the past, I was concerned about optimum diet, optimum strength, optimum. And I'm just not so much in love with optimum anymore. I will do stuff sometimes. Okay, this needs to be a bit more optimum. But the way that I like to move in general in my life doesn't really gel with the idea of optimum, because optimum can constrict your movement in not just in your practice, but your social practice as well. So yeah, man, you can either do it completely strict, or you can break it up, put upper lower first, whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
No worries. Good. Anyone else before I sign out? Feel free to jump in. I'm not on a time scale. Good. So I'll just say, everyone, thank you very much for turning up and joining us. One thing I will do, I'm going to pop up at some point a PayPal donation link, just because of this time. If you want to contribute something for the online workshop, I know you've already paid for your programming and things like this, but if you feel like it, I'll just send it out with the next email. And if you want to donate anything, it's absolutely fine. Of course, it's not mandatory whatsoever. And likewise, if you know anyone else who would like to join these online workshop things, we can host enough people so you just throw them the link and they can join and watch for as long as they like. Okay? All right, it's good. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be and move well. And I'll see some of you again soon next week. I'll keep you updated. Okay? Ciao.